I just finished playing God of War 3 for the first time in a long time, and I was kind of shocked at the level of violence that our boy Kratos performs in this game. Like, I remembered it being pretty violent, but holy crap, this guy is crazy. There are multiple boss battles that end with these extended shots of Kratos just savagely beating the Greek gods to death with his bare fists. It's brutal. Watch him beat the crap out of Poseidon here. Like, geez, Kratos, if you're gonna kill him, then just kill him. Do you really have to torture him first? And it's not just the Greek gods who receive this brutal punishment, who arguably probably do deserve it. To be fair, they are a bunch of manipulative, murderous jerkwads. They have treated Kratos like total garbage, tricked him into killing his own family, used him for their own selfish ends, and then threw him away like a piece of trash when they were done with him. He does have some legitimate reasons for being angry, but Kratos treats everyone this way, even people who definitely don't deserve it. People who have done nothing to him. People who are not only innocent, but totally defenseless. Who are just unlucky enough to get caught in his path of destruction. For example, down in the underworld you find this guy Kratos, who, just like Kratos, has been tricked and treated horribly by the Greek gods. He has been imprisoned here and sentenced to eternal torture by thorny bramble. It definitely feels like he and Kratos could team up, could work together, could help each other out, or in the very least Kratos could let the guy go or just go on by. But what does Kratos do? He lights Kratos on fire. He burns him to death for no reason. It's just cruel. And Kratos doesn't care. He's totally apathetic. It's like this other human being doesn't even exist to him. The suffering of others is irrelevant to him. Things like this happen again and again. There's this time when Kratos is sidling alongside this burning building, and a random civilian jumps out of the window and onto the ledge to escape from the fires burning within. The man despairs that he has lost everything in the fire and then curses the gods for doing this to him. So, of course, Kratos cracks his freaking skull to move him out of the way. It's so unnecessary. Like, Kratos, I get that you're upset at the gods, but this random guy didn't do anything to you. The violence in this game is so casual. Human life is meaningless to Kratos. Less than meaningless. He's just as bad, if not worse, than the gods he is trying to destroy. The absolute worst part of the game to me is in Poseidon's chamber. There you find this sex slave who has been chained and locked up. She begs Kratos over and over again, please don't hurt me, please don't kill me, please just leave me alone, while Kratos is savagely shoving her through the halls. It ends with Kratos forcing her to prop up this heavy wheel, which then collapses and crushes her to death. Dude, Kratos, what the fuck, man? What is wrong with you? You could have used anything to prop that up. You didn't have to murder some poor defenseless random woman to do it. A woman who has already been enslaved and abused by the very gods you are seeking vengeance against. At some point, I would like to do an entire essay on the way violence is portrayed in the original trilogy. I think the most interesting question here is, how do the developers want their audience to feel in moments like this? Like, do they want us to feel disgusted by the main character's actions? Or are we meant to be titillated by this violence? Do they want us to feel excited by it? How does the portrayal of violence change from the first game to the third game? And then how does it change again when we get to the Norse mythology games? But that's a subject for a different video. For the purposes of this video, which is a character study of Kratos and how he changed between God of War 3 and God of War 4, all you really need to know is that back in God of War 3, Kratos was really violent, like crazy violent. But for all of this incredible violence, there's something else in his character here too. The thing is, I don't think Kratos actually wants to be this violent. He doesn't want to be this angry person, consumed by hatred and vengeance. The reason he's doing all of this is that he feels he doesn't have any other choice. He feels like the Greek gods have stolen any other possible life away from him. He doesn't have anything left except for violence. But what he really wants, deep down inside, in his heart of hearts, is to be a father again. And you can see that in his interactions with Pandora. So, Pandora was created by the smithing god Hephaestus as a key to Pandora's box. However, instead of just creating a normal key, he created an artificial artificial life form with emotions, desires, and sentience. He created her in the form of a young girl and came to love her as a daughter. In God of War 3, Kratos seeks to free Pandora, not because he wants to help her, at least not at first, but because he needs her to open Pandora's box, so he can seize the power to kill a god that lies within. In spite of his gruff and violent exterior, it quickly becomes clear that Kratos is growing to care for the girl over the course of the story. His interactions with her are extremely similar to his interactions with his later son Atreus in God of War 4. They both navigate the environment together. Just like Atreus, Pandora actually helps him solve puzzles. He lifts her up to ledges that Kratos can't reach or helps her enter confined spaces that he can't fit inside. Then there's this whole dramatic puzzle and platforming sequence where he rescues her from drowning in a trap. He even tries to stop Pandora from sacrificing herself to open the box. With her, for the first time in the game, he shows mercy to another character. He shows that there is still something left inside him besides anger and rage. I think this is who Kratos really is, or at least the person he wants to be. He wants to be caring. He wants to be merciful. He just hasn't really been given that chance since the death of his own wife and child. I mean, obviously, he could have shown mercy to Perithous, or that guy on the ledge, or Poseidon's princess. But hey, none of those were cute little helpless girls who reminded him of his own daughter, so whatever. In the end, he still chooses violence and vengeance over being a caretaker, even with Pandora. There's this moment when he's trying to save Pandora from getting sucked into the flame of Olympus, but then he lets her go so he can attack Zeus. In that moment, he chooses killing Zeus over saving Pandora. He very explicitly makes a choice to be violent rather than merciful, and ultimately it was the wrong choice, because Pandora's death was wasted, pointless. The box is empty. Kratos already possessed the power to kill a god, even though he didn't know it. Pandora didn't need to die. If he'd chosen mercy, if he'd chosen to prioritize saving her, he still would have had the power to kill Zeus later. I think it's this final failure that truly breaks Kratos. This choice of violence over mercy that finally convinces him that if he is going to live, then he needs to live differently. He needs to make different choices, because he really did care about Pandora. He really did want her to live. And her death, which is completely his own fault, the fault of his violence and rage, truly hurts him. At the end of God of War 3, the Greek pantheon has been slaughtered and the Greek world destroyed. But there is this quiet note of hope. Hope still lives in the world. There is some small hope that, even after all this death and violence, something better may come in the future. After the credits roll, Kratos disappears off on some lonely journey to realize that hope, to learn to be a better man. And in God of War 4, that faint glimmer of hope has actually been realized. God of War 4 takes place an unknown number of years after the end of God of War 3, at least a couple hundred years later, but maybe much longer than that. The Kratos we see in God of War 4 is a character who is written to be older, to be quieter, someone who is far calmer than before, who controls his emotions, who chooses to show mercy when he can. But that old anger is still lurking inside him, that old rage. He has to fight to control himself, and if he loses control, it won't just be himself who he fails, because he has a son now. And even more than protecting himself from that anger, he needs to protect his son from that anger too. Now I want to watch the very first cutscene in the game, because in this first scene, you can see how he tries to control that anger, and you can see the way he tries to protect his son from it too.
Found some.
Get in the boat, boy.
This is such a fantastically crafted scene. I'm so impressed by it. It is truly perfect and does such an amazing but also really subtle job of showing us Kratos' character and how he has changed. So let's break this down piece by piece. Kratos' wife has passed away. We almost never see him express any emotion at this loss, by which I mean he almost never openly or outwardly expresses any grief. But that's not because he doesn't feel grief. I think Kratos is emotionally completely shattered by the loss, but he controls those emotions. He controls them so well it can be hard to tell if he even has emotions. In his past, Kratos was a character who was ruled by his emotions, particularly by anger. He let his emotions run wild. That lack of control led to absolute disaster not only for him, but for everyone around him, including the people he cared about most, his former wife and daughter who died by his hand. Between games, Kratos has learned control. Nowadays, he keeps his emotions totally bottled up. In some ways, I think Kratos is a character who is afraid of his own emotions, afraid of expressing them for fear that if he does, he won't be able to control them anymore, and then his former tragedies will repeat themselves all over again. Except here, in this very first scene, we see that control slip, if only for a moment. The scene begins with Kratos caressing this tree, because that glowing handprint is his wife's handprint. She marked this tree as one she wished to be used in her funeral pyre, and so there is some tiny little bit of her presence lingering on the tree. By being close to it in some small, tiny, distant way, he can still be close to her. And look at the gentleness, the tenderness with which Kratos touches it. Kratos almost never talks about his wife in this game. We barely ever see his feelings for her, except here. In this first scene, we can see it. You can see in his animations here, the way he presses his forehead against the bark, his affection for his wife, that he cared about her, that he still longs for her. Next, he starts chopping down the tree. At first, his swings are controlled, steady, rhythmic. But then he starts putting more and more force into those swings, more emotion. He yells louder and louder, and then he finally screams in anger and tears right through the trunk. Afterwards, he immediately gets his emotions back under control, immediately returns to being the stoic character he has become. But in that glimpse, we saw his true feelings. We saw how upset he truly is at the loss of his wife. He's pissed off, and of course he is. There is a lot of anger in grief. And we also see, in a small way, how destructive his anger can still be if he loses control of it. We see why he's fighting so hard to stay in control. Notice when the strap on his arms comes loose, the strap covering the old scars from the burning blades of chaos, the weapons he wielded when he was tricked into murdering his former wife and child. Those scars are a reminder of his failures, of the terrible consequences of his loss of control. When he wraps the straps back around his arm, he's also symbolically wrapping up his emotions, covering them up. But that's not all he's covering up. When he covers up those scars, he's also covering up his entire past. His past sins, his past mistakes. And he's not hiding them from himself, he's hiding those from his son. Notice the way he positions his body to keep the scars on his arms out of Atreus' line of vision. The way he blocks Atreus' view of them. Kratos is very literally and very physically hiding the evidence of his past sins from his son. This is the primary conflict of the entire game. Kratos is fighting to stop his son from making the same mistakes that he himself once made. And to accomplish that, he tries to hide everything from Atreus. The violence he committed in the past, that he killed his own father, the very fact that they are gods at all. And this is his character arc in the story, his growth. Over the course of this story, Kratos will learn to make a different choice, to be open, honest, and compassionate, to accept his past, to stop hiding, that this will do far more to save his son's life than lies will. I think Kratos is a character who is driven by fear, and not fear for himself, but fear for his son. He is afraid of what his son might become. His son is a god, and that means his son holds tremendous power. But power doesn't only corrupt, it can also make your life miserable. Being a god was never a good thing for Kratos. It never made him happy. All that power ever did for him was get him entangled in the manipulative machinations of the Greek gods. It only ever led him down into a deeper and deeper misery. He doesn't want that for his son. He doesn't want his son to be consumed by that unhappy life. But the problem is, Kratos has no idea how to prevent that from happening. Basically, every single god Kratos has ever encountered in his life has been a miserable piece of crap. They all sucked. They were all caught up in these schemes and manipulations and wars and slaughters. None of them were ever happy. And we see even more examples in God of War 4. Baldur, Magni, and Modi are all miserable, unhappy characters. Of course, the greatest example of all is Kratos himself. No one is more miserable and unhappy than Kratos is in God of War 3. Godhood ruined his life. Kratos doesn't have any examples of happy god role models he can follow in the raising of his own son. He is facing a problem that, at the beginning of the game, simply has no solution. That's why the story of Tyr, the Norse god of war, becomes so important. Tyr is the rare example of a good god. He didn't use his power to start wars, but to stop them. He traveled the world meeting new peoples, learning new ideas, forging new friendships. His life is proof that a god can be good. Godhood isn't only a curse. Tyr's story gives Kratos hope that his son has a chance. He doesn't have to be that hateful, miserable sort of god that is so common in this series. But at the start of the game, Kratos doesn't know about Tyr, doesn't know if it is even possible for a god to be good and happy. So to solve this problem, Kratos chooses to do nothing. Because nothing is all he can do. He just doesn't deal with the problem. By hiding his past and his godhood from Atreus, he isn't solving the problem, he's just prolonging it. It becomes clear from their dialogue that Kratos and Atreus have never really spent any significant time together before all of this. They didn't have much of a relationship. And that's because of Kratos' fear. He fears the influence he will have on his son. The death of his wife forces him to confront this fear, but he still doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to be a father at all, much less the father of a god. Now, we need to watch a few early scenes of them together so we can understand where their relationship begins in this story. And it's at a pretty rocky place. So here's the first scene.
I'm sorry.
Squeeze. This knife. It was hers. Now it is yours. She taught you to hunt.
She knew.
Show me.
Now?
Now.
What are we hunting?
You are hunting deer.
Which way?
In the direction of deer.
Okay, this way.
Kratos is definitely being more than a little bit of an asshole here, but I don't think he quite realizes it. He's not doing it intentionally. This is how he's learned to survive. He doesn't know any other way to live other than being this gruff, demanding, even sort of emotionally callous person. He does demonstrate affection in these small and quiet ways he knows how, by bandaging his son's hand, by gifting him the knife. But Kratos really doesn't know how to grieve, or at least he doesn't know how to allow his son the time and space needed to grieve properly. Atreus' mother's body hasn't even finished burning yet, and already Kratos is demanding that he go hunting. This makes sense for Kratos. He wants to bottle up his emotions. He wants to control his grief. And one way to do that is by distracting himself, by going off and doing something else, and so that's what he has Atreus do. And maybe he even thinks he's helping Atreus by giving him a distraction. Those gruff, unhelpful commands he gives to Atreus here, hunt deer, go in direction of deer, are Kratos mimicking his own upbringing. Kratos wasn't raised in an environment of affection and patience. He was raised in one of the harshest possible environments, as a Spartan warrior, where children were expected to either figure out a way to survive some of the harshest military training in the world or not. There was no time for patience, no place for affection. It was a brutal sink or swim environment. This is the only way he knows how to raise a son, because his own childhood is the only experience with raising children that he has. But in this next scene, we see that as harsh as Kratos is, he is trying to be gentler.
There it is!
Hold! What are you doing? Now his guard is up. Only fire. Only fire when I tell you to fire.
I'm sorry.
Do not be sorry. Be better. Find it. Find it.
Kratos responds to Atreus' failure in probably the exact same way that his own rigid Spartan instructors responded to his failures as a child, with anger and impatience. Get it right the first time, don't be sorry, be better, and be better right now, or I'm gonna treat you like you're a worthless piece of crap. But you can also hear Kratos catch himself. He starts out by shouting, but then realizes what he's doing, the effect his words are having on his son, and then he lowers the volume of his voice. He's not exactly speaking gently, but at least he isn't shouting anymore. Kratos is a deeply flawed character in this game. He would be a really hard guy to have as your father. He doesn't really know how to do this, but he is trying. He's trying to be more patient. He's trying to control his emotions. He's trying not to treat his son as harshly as he was treated. He's not totally succeeding, not yet. He still has a lot of growing left to do, but we can definitely see that he's trying to be a better father. And just that attempt already makes him a kind of character worth admiring. In the next scene, we'll actually see Kratos behaving even more patiently.
Wait for my mark. Relax. Do not think of it as an animal. It is simply a target. Clear your mind. Steady your aim and breathe in. Exhale.
I got it!
Good.
It's still alive.
Your knife. No. Finish what you started.
I can't.
This time, instead of shouting, Kratos speaks gently, softly. He offers instructions without making demands. Already he's doing a much better job at this. He still pushes really hard. When Atreus struggles to finish the kill, he doesn't let his son off. He doesn't stop pushing him to do what has to be done. But he also doesn't shout this time. He doesn't come in charging, yelling, "What are you doing? You suck! You're so bad at this." Instead, he is patient, and because of his patience, his son accomplishes this task. But we also see how much further he has to go. Kratos wants to comfort his son here. We see Kratos about to touch his son's back, then hesitate. This is him attempting to make that emotional connection and then failing. Kratos doesn't know how to be that affectionate father. He doesn't know how to show affection. In these 3 scenes that we watch together, we see that Kratos definitely has the potential to be a really good father. He is struggling, he's making mistakes, but he's getting better too. But the problem is that Kratos is not an ordinary father of an ordinary son. He is a god, and he is the father of a god. That requires a lot more than just patience. And even worse than that, he is someone with the potential for terrible rage and violence lurking inside him. And that means his son has that potential rage and violence lurking inside too, which we can see in this next scene.
That's what you get!
Boy,
Think I'm afraid of you! You're nothing to me!
boy, look at me. Look at me, boy. Boy, look at me.
We did it.
You are not ready.
What? Are you serious? I found the deer. I proved myself. How am I not ready?
We are going home.
I haven't been sick in a long time. I can do this.
You are not ready.
When Atreus is slashing away at the body of the troll, no control over his actions, yelling and screaming, violent, Kratos sees that potential for rage in his son, and so do we. It's honestly kind of disturbing. We see that Atreus could become exactly the kind of miserable god Kratos was at his absolute worst. Atreus absolutely has the potential to not only be violent, but to lose control over that violence, to lose control over himself. That would be bad enough if he was just a regular kid, but he's not a regular kid. He is a god. He possesses tremendous latent power, and when that power awakens, if Atreus loses control over that power, the way he loses control over himself in this scene, it will have horrible consequences for everyone. That's what Kratos means when he says, "You are not ready." What he sees here is that Atreus is not ready to handle the power of a god. Kratos is not willing to take Atreus out into the world until he knows for certain, without any doubt, that Atreus can handle that power. But he can't explain that to Atreus, because Atreus doesn't even know that he is a god. So instead, all Kratos can do is say, "You're not ready," without saying why, which of course infuriates Atreus, just as it would infuriate anyone to be judged by standards that aren't even being properly explained, which only makes him angrier, which makes him lose more control, which makes the problem worse. We, the audience, can see that Kratos' actions are going to lead to the exact disaster he's trying to prevent. Because of his unwillingness to be honest, he and his son are trapped in a cycle of resentment and bitterness, where neither of them understands the other. Of course, Laufey, Atreus' mother, foresaw all of this. She foresaw that Kratos and Atreus needed to leave home in order to grow and learn together, that if they remained inside her Jotun protection stave forever, it would only be incubating another godly tragedy. So in marking trees to be used for her funeral pyre, she marked trees that, when cut down, would break that protection stave, thus opening Kratos and Atreus to the breach by Baldur. Baldur's explosive arrival here is actually a huge blessing for Kratos, even though he doesn't recognize it. He and Atreus were never going to figure this out while just sitting around at home. Something had to come along to force them out into the world. We're not going to watch the Baldur scenes in this video because I just posted a whole other video all about Baldur, but I will quickly summarize my analysis of his character here. Baldur, as a character, is a foil to both Kratos and Atreus. His uncontrollable rage and violence, his refusal to forgive his mother or anyone else, parallels both Kratos' past, back when he let his own violence and rage drive him to destroy the Greek pantheon, and also a potential future for Atreus. If raised the wrong way, Atreus could become someone very like Baldur in the future. Something else that's important to note in this scene is that Baldur has to punch Kratos in the face like 5 times before Kratos fights back. This was shocking to me the first time I saw it. Back in God of War 3, Kratos was brutally murdering random innocent people just because they accidentally happened to be in his way. The Kratos of God of War 3 never would have allowed himself to be punched this many times before fighting back. We can see here that his character has already experienced a tremendous amount of growth between games. Already at the start of the game, he is a far more patient character. He tries to avoid conflict. He doesn't want to kill unless he absolutely has to. Kratos is already a totally new character. Next, I want to watch 2 very short clips, and both of these clips show Atreus doing the exact opposite of what Kratos is doing with Baldur in that scene. Show how little control Atreus has over his own emotions, and the consequences of that lack of control. Both of these clips will involve confrontations with the sons of Thor, Magni and Modi. Magni and Modi are 2 arrogant little shitheads who do an excellent job of provoking Atreus, of getting him to lose control, so here they are.
Wow, kids. Oh, that must have been some war to play with the last of him.
I'll kill you!
Fletcher, you have no idea. You son of a bitch!
Get these guys! I'll rip your head off!
Sickness. Fever has returned.
No! It hasn't.
Roy,
The coughing, the blood. The boy's sick, he needs Freya.
No!
steady.
I'll be alright.
There you go, lad.
I'm fine, see?
Oh, are you dumb? That your father's doing? Or did you get it from your mum? She's stupid and ugly.
Shut up! You don't know anything about my mother.
Oh, it's true. But I'm gonna get to know you really well. You're gonna be my new brother. Right after I finish killing your father! Whoops. I think I broke him.
Brother, the boy.
Atreus.
You have to get into Freya quickly. There's no other way.
In these scenes, we see that total lack of control that Kratos is so afraid of. Atreus cannot control his emotions, and particularly cannot control his anger, just like his father back in his darkest days. Magni and Modi barely have to poke at him at all to get him to lose his cool. All they do is a handful of weak, "Oh, your mother's so dumb" type of jokes, and Atreus loses his mind. Of course, his mother is a sensitive spot for him, which Magni and Modi immediately pick up and exploit to great effect. Can you imagine if Atreus' godly powers awakened when he still had this little control over his anger? How frightening that would be, how destructive Atreus could be. But Atreus is also sick. He has this latent illness, currently in remission, but threatening to break out again at any moment, which is what happens at the end of that scene with Modi. Overstressed, in a terrible rage, Atreus' sickness overwhelms him. And I'm going to discuss this sickness and its role in the story more thoroughly in just a second, but first I want to watch one more scene. Let's watch the scene where Kratos carries his son to the goddess Freya for healing, which is one of my favorite scenes in the game.
Freya! Open the door! We need your help! Woman, do you hear me? It is urgent!
I'm still a god. Go away.
The boy has fallen ill! Freya! He's ill.
Inside. This is no ordinary illness. The boy's true nature, your true nature, fights within him.
I did this to him. Will you help me?
Of course. There is a rare ingredient found only in Helheim. The keeper that protects the Bridge of the Damned. I need its heart.
Hell,
The realm of the dead. Do you know it?
not this one.
It is a land of unyielding cold. Fires cannot burn there, and no magic in all the 9 realms can create a blaze. As for the dead, your frost axe will be useless. You'll need to find something else.
Then I must return home. Dig up a past I swore would stay buried.
Who you were before doesn't matter. This boy is not your past, he is your son. And he needs his father.
Instead of thinking of this as a literal illness, you should think of it as a literary device. This is an artificial plot device designed by the writers to push their characters in a certain direction. The writers needed some way to force Kratos to reckon with his choice, to hide the fact of their godhood from his son. The writers could have accomplished this in any of a dozen different ways, but they chose this sickness. Atreus not knowing that he is a god is literally, physically making him sick. This lie was going to hurt Atreus eventually, inevitably. Not knowing who he is, what he is, not understanding the unique challenges that he is going to have to face is going to hurt Atreus. But that's kind of a subtle idea, and a conflict that would take a lot of time to appear naturally. That's the kind of conflict whose negative consequences could take years to become fully apparent. So the writers force those consequences into the present immediately with this sickness. It's smart writing. But let's get back to the scene itself. This is Kratos at his most desperate moment in maybe the entire series. Kratos is usually so very in control, like he always knows what to do next. But that's because usually all he has to do next is kill whatever happens to be in front of him. And killing is something he knows a lot about. However, he knows very little about sickness or about healing. Atreus' fatal illness is a problem for which Kratos truly has no tools with which to confront. He is helpless here, and you can hear how helpless he is in the voice acting. This is one of my favorite scenes because it is just so well done. The voice actor, Christopher Judge, puts so much pathos into Kratos' lines here. It's just heartbreaking. Listen to him when he realizes that he is responsible for his son's pain. Doesn't it just make you want to cry? And of course, this is the character realizing the harm his lies are doing to his son. Kratos lied to Atreus, not for his son's sake, but to protect himself. Kratos was too afraid to deal with the fact that his son was a god, too afraid to deal with his own past, so he hid them. Once again, Kratos is realizing that his actions and choices have hurt the person he cares about most. There is a what have I done quality to this scene. I also absolutely love the delivery of the line when he asks her for help, along with the fantastic facial animations, which are just perfect. Look at how pitiful the expression on Kratos' face is here. He's like a wounded puppy. It makes me want to cry every time I see it. This is one of the few times in the series when Kratos asks someone else for help, because he has to. As I discussed before, he has no tools with which to confront this. He can't heal Atreus on his own. That's why he has to go to Freya for help. Freya's character is beautiful in this scene. She is immediately willing to help as soon as she learns that Atreus is sick, and she doesn't ask for anything in return. This moment forges a deep bond between Kratos and Freya that, even after getting pretty seriously strained after he kills Baldur, is never actually broken. From this moment on, Kratos is permanently indebted to Freya. He will, I think, do anything for her. After this, Kratos has to very literally dig up his past, retrieve the burning blades of chaos from where he hid them underneath his home. So let's watch that too.
There's nowhere you can hide, Spartan. Put as much distance between you and the truth as you want. It changes nothing. Pretend to be everything you are not. Teacher, husband, father. But there is one unavoidable truth you will never escape. You cannot change. You will always be a monster.
I know. But I am your monster no longer.
This game began with Kratos metaphorically covering up his past by visually covering up his arms with those straps. Now we've reached a point where he is metaphorically uncovering his past, even sort of putting that past boldly on display for anyone to see by re-equipping the Blades of Chaos. And look how strongly the touch of these blades affects him. Look at the way his hands and arms shake. He never wanted to wield these weapons again. He never wanted to face his past again. He wanted to put it all behind him, hide it forever. But of course, that was never going to be possible. Our pasts are as much a part of ourselves as our very bones. You cannot get rid of your past. This should be a really exciting moment for fans. Our favorite character donning his classic weapons from the first game in the series. In any other game, this would be a moment full of fan service. We'd be all like, woohoo, he's putting the swords back on, oh yeah, alright! But instead, the way the scene is written and presented, you can feel how much Kratos doesn't want to do this, how much it hurts him to wield these blades again. And as a result, it's not an exciting moment. It's not a moment full of fan service. Instead, it feels almost tragic. These are the Blades of Chaos, forged in the fires of the underworld. When Kratos pledged himself to the service of the Greek gods, he was very literally bound by the chains of these blades. They are magical blades that could not be removed until the wielder's time of service ended. In this way, the chains of the blades are a very literal representation of the way Kratos was chained by the Greek gods, the way he was used by them, manipulated by them. But for Kratos, they represent a lot more than that, because these are the blades he wielded when he unknowingly killed his own wife and daughter. For him, these weapons represent the darkest time of his life, when he was an unthinking, wrathful, murderous slave of Ares, the Greek god of war. However, for Atreus, to save his son's life, Kratos is willing to wield these terrible blades again, willing to confront his ugly past. That he equips these at all really shows just how much he loves his son, how far he is willing to go for Atreus. Next, let's examine his confrontation with Athena. I don't think it matters from a writing perspective whether this really is Athena's spirit reappearing before him again after all these years to taunt him, to further punish him for his crimes against the gods, or whether this is just a hallucination, a personification of his own guilt, a way for him to be confronted by that guilt. Emotionally, the impact is the same either way. I've always thought that Athena is the true villain of the original trilogy. She is the ultimate manipulator. It was with her explicit aid and motivation that Kratos was able to slaughter the Greek pantheon. For Kratos, Athena, not Zeus, represents the worst of the gods. The way they scheme, the way they manipulate, the way they trick and obfuscate. It's significant that Kratos doesn't deny being a monster. That is how he views himself, his self-perception. But nowadays, he is at least his own monster. His monstrous acts no longer serve some selfish god's schemes. If he is a monster, it will be for his son's sake. He will don the weapons and visage of a monster if it means saving his son's life. Next, let's fast forward to when Atreus is healed.
Back of your hand.
He is still ill.
I can break the fever, but to heal...
He must know the truth of what he is.
Yes.
It is not so simple.
Help me prop him up. Did I tell you that I have a son, too? It's been forever since I last saw him. At his birth, the runes foretold a needless death. The babe in my arms was so small, so helpless. I knew right then I would do anything to protect him, no matter the sacrifice. Of course, everything I did for myself. I let my needs, my fears, come before what he needed. And I couldn't see his resentment until it was too late. Don't make the same mistake. Have faith in him. I know the truth isn't simple, but nothing is when it involves your child.
It is a curse. The boy has been cursed.
This scene begins with Kratos being very subtly confronted with how little he knows about how to care for his sick son, and by extension, how to be a caretaker at all. It's a really small moment and easy to miss. When Kratos first walks in, he touches his son's forehead, as if to check for fever, and Freya has to tell him, no, use the back of your hand. And she is correct, this is a common method for checking for fever if you don't have access to a thermometer. The back of the hand is naturally far cooler than the palm of the hand, and so easier to tell if someone's head feels feverish. That Kratos is unaware of something even this simple is meant to represent how little he knows about being a caretaker. For all he knows about combat, about survival, about self-control, he doesn't know very much at all about taking care of a sick child. He is so unprepared for fatherhood. He has so much left to learn. In this scene, Kratos is also confronted by the selfishness of his decisions. Freya makes it very clear, you chose to hide your past from your son to protect yourself. If you really care about him, you will do what's right for him, not what's right for you. If you really care about him, you will tell him the truth. The parallel between her own relationship with Baldur and Kratos' relationship with Atreus is also made very clear. Freya once made a selfish choice. In the name of protecting her son, she was really only protecting herself. In protecting Baldur from death, she was actually just protecting herself from having to deal with his death. not allowing him to make his own choice. That selfishness led to absolute disaster. Her selfish choices, at least partially, led to Baldur being as resentful and angry as he is today. If Kratos wants to stop Atreus from ending up the same way, which is of course the main conflict of this entire story, he needs to stop being so selfish. Next, listen to the way Kratos says, "It is a curse. The boy has been cursed." Again, fantastic delivery by Christopher Judge. He puts so much emotion into that line. The curse Kratos speaks of here is godhood itself. Kratos believes that being a god is a curse. This is a fascinating inversion of expectations. Most of us would think of godhood as being pretty awesome. Eternal life, tons of power, get to do whatever you want, sounds pretty nice. But as we've already discussed in detail in this essay, that hasn't been Kratos' experience of godhood, or for basically any other god in the series. Being a god in the God of War series sucks. The classic line is that with great power comes great responsibility. But God of War's version of that line would be something like, with great power comes great tragedy, great consequences. The more power you have, the more power you have to destroy, and not just everything around you, but to destroy yourself. Kratos believes that just by bringing Atreus into this world, he has cursed his son. Just by being born, his son has been destined to a life of tragedy. He loves his son so much, but he still has no clue how to prevent that terrible future from coming true. Next, let's watch the scene where Kratos reveals the truth to Atreus.
I know you overheard my talk with Freya. You think you understand, but you do not. Why do you say nothing?
You said I was cursed. You think I'm weak because I'm not like you. I know I was never what you wanted. But after all this, I thought maybe things were different.
You do not know everything, boy.
No. But at least I know the truth now.
The truth. The truth. I'm a god, boy. From another land far from here. When I came to these shores, I chose to live as a man. But the truth is, I was born a god. And so were you. Boy, have you nothing to say?
Can I turn into an animal?
Can you turn into an animal? No. No, I do not think so.
I'm a god. Mother knew? She was a god too?
No. She was mortal, but she knew my true nature.
I'm a god. Why did you wait so long to tell me?
I had hoped to spare you. Being a god, it can be a lifetime of anguish and tragedy. That is the curse.
What sorts of things can I do? Can I fly? Turn invisible?
Even after everything that's happened, what Freya said to him, Kratos still wasn't going to reveal the truth to Atreus yet. He was actually still putting it off. It's not until Atreus delivers that heartbreaking line that he thinks his father doesn't want him. And of course that's what Atreus thinks. Kratos has never had a relationship with Atreus. He has avoided interacting with Atreus for fear of corrupting him, for fear of himself, fear of passing on that potential for rage and violence. But Atreus doesn't know that. All he sees is a father that doesn't seem to want anything to do with him. It's to correct this mistaken assumption, this further emotional harm he has inflicted on his son, that Kratos finally tells Atreus that he is a god. Kratos is a really flawed character. More than once in this game, he doesn't do the right thing until he is forced to by circumstances outside his control. He is admirable in that he does still ultimately choose to do the right thing, but it takes him a long time to get there, which is good writing. Characters confronting their flaws, either to overcome them or be overcome by them, makes for great storytelling. I absolutely love Atreus' response to being told that he is a god. Atreus is written to act and speak so maturely in this game that sometimes it's easy to forget that he's still a child, which is what you see here. His first response is, "Oh sweet, can I turn into an animal?" It's such a classic goofy little kid sort of question. It also demonstrates a totally different perception of godhood. For Kratos, being a god is this terrible, awful, weighty affliction. But for Atreus, godhood could be fun. You could get to turn into an animal. That's why Kratos seems so surprised by Atreus' question. He's completely forgotten that there is a potential good side to being a god. It's also pretty funny that he answers by saying no. Obviously, we all know now that Atreus definitely can turn into an animal. However, this good side of being a god doesn't last for long. Immediately, all of Kratos' worst fears about Atreus learning that he is a god begin to come true. Atreus begins to lose his compassion, his friendliness, his desire to help others. He learns that he can do whatever he wants, that he can get away with being selfish and unkind, so that's exactly what he does. This is the curse that Kratos was speaking about, the corrupting power of being a god. The most dramatic example of this godly corruption appears when Atreus murders Modi, when Atreus, as a god, callously wields the power over life and death, chooses to kill an enemy who is already beaten, who poses no threat, for no reason other than petty revenge for childish insults. At that moment, Atreus even says, "We're gods, that means we can do whatever we want." But that's not the scene we're going to watch. Instead, we're going to watch this scene where Atreus berates Sindri, which I think, given the added context of what ends up happening to Sindri later, actually hits even harder. So here it is.
Ah! Oh, don't go anywhere. Be with you in 2 shakes.
Father, can I tell him?
No.
Tell me what? Did you put this wheel in your mouth? Oh, God. I'll vomit. I'm not kidding. I'll throw up on it.
It is nothing. A family matter.
Oh. Oh. I can tell you a thing or two about family matters.
Let me guess. Your brother isn't as talented as you, and his work is junk.
Those things are accurate. Your point?
It's all you ever talk about, over and over. Do something about it or shut up already.
I see.
Yeah! We're sick of hearing about little people's little problems!
All right. That hurt a little. Let's have a look at your gear then.
This scene always breaks my heart. Sindri is such a nice person. He helps Kratos and Atreus constantly. Sure, he's a little bit annoying, but so is everyone. Before, Atreus was interested in Sindri's problems, curious about his life, wanted to be friends. But now that he's discovered that he is a god, Atreus thinks he's too important to have to listen to those little problems, that he is too big for this. He speaks callously, not just without any regard to the feelings of others, but actively trying to hurt Sindri's feelings. When I first played this game, I found this to be a genuinely upsetting change in Atreus' character. Before, Atreus had been such a ray of light and joy and fun in the so very often bleak and hopeless world of God of War. Through Atreus, I thought Kratos had potential to become a much better man. But instead, the opposite is happening. Through godhood, Atreus is quickly becoming just as ugly and selfish as every other god we've met in this series. Something else that bothered me the first time I played the game is Kratos' near total lack of reaction to the crappy way Atreus is behaving. For a long time, while Atreus is very clearly getting worse and worse, Kratos mostly just sits by and lets it happen. He doesn't really scold his son, doesn't discipline him. Mimir even comments on it at one point. After something ugly Atreus says in Tyr's temple, Mimir says, "Are we really just gonna let that sit there?" And I was asking the same thing. I was like, are we really gonna let it sit there? I kept asking myself, why doesn't Kratos do anything about this? Why doesn't he say anything? Why doesn't he stop this? But the truth is that Kratos has no clue how to stop this. He doesn't know how to stop godhood from corrupting his son, the same way it has corrupted every other god he has ever encountered. He doesn't know the right words to say, so he doesn't say anything at all. Kratos is a flawed character. Just like he didn't know how to deal with Atreus' illness, he also doesn't know how to deal with Atreus' corruption. Except this time, he can't just bring the kid to Freya and beg her to fix the problem for him. This time, he has to figure it out for himself. Next, let's watch the scene where Kratos finally puts his foot down.
You will listen to me and not speak a word. I am your father, and you, boy, are not yourself. You are too quick to temper. You are rash, insubordinate, and out of control. This will not stand. You will honor your mother and abandon this path you have chosen. It is not too late. This discussion is far from over. We are here because of you, boy. Never forget that.
Finally, after hours of bad behavior, Kratos disciplines his son. But it's really important to examine exactly how he disciplines his son here. We've already seen an example of bad parental discipline in this game. The last time we saw Modi, before he was murdered by Atreus, he had been beaten, bruised, and bloody by his father Thor for the death of his brother, which he wasn't even responsible for. This is an example of bad discipline. My child is doing something I don't like, so I'm just gonna beat the crap out of them. Keep beating them until they stop doing what I don't want them to do. This kind of heavy-handed corporal punishment is probably at least partially responsible for why Magni and Modi turned out to be such terrible people. Kratos is harsh with his son, but he's also communicating clearly here. He says very explicitly, without going overboard, without physical or verbal abuse, this is what you are doing wrong, and this is why it is wrong. This is what you're going to stop doing, and this is how your behavior is going to change going forward. And it works. Atreus' behavior immediately begins to improve. This is how Kratos can blunt that godly corruption. A mixture of good, productive discipline without abuse, without going too far, combined with open communication and honesty. It also helps that the two of them have to work together to escape Helheim, have to save each other's lives. But Kratos still isn't being totally honest. He still hasn't been honest about his past, even after Atreus sees an apparition of Zeus in Helheim. So now let's fast forward all the way past their journey through Helheim, past their journey between realms, past their battle with Baldur, during which, by defeating this narrative foil to themselves, they also thematically get to defeat the worst version of themselves too, past Baldur's death. If you want to hear more of my analysis on those moments, you can watch my Baldur video. In the sparing and then killing of Baldur, Kratos demonstrates two kinds of character growth. First, he demonstrates his new capacity for mercy when he spares Baldur's life when he is no longer a threat. But then he still kills Baldur, and that demonstrates a different kind of growth. He gives Baldur the chance to be better, to make a better choice. And when Baldur refuses that chance, that's when Kratos actually kills him. Not for vengeance, not out of anger. This is a controlled decision. This is a decision made calmly to save lives, to make a better world. This is Kratos learning what kind of man he wants to be, what kind of god, how he wants to use his power. Kratos will always excel in violence. He will always be a fighter. He can't change that about himself, but he can change how he uses that violence. And in this moment, when he kills Baldur to protect Freya, that is him choosing to use violence for good, violence to destroy evil, to protect people worth protecting. It is a far more controlled form of violence violence than we've seen him employ in the past. This is violence as a scalpel rather than violence as a megaton hammer. Next, let's watch the scene where Kratos displays one last surge of character growth, when he finally stops hiding and chooses to be fully honest with his son.
You were just an animal. Passing on your cruelty and rage, you will never change.
And you do not know me.
I know enough. Does he?
Boy, listen close. I'm from a land called Sparta. I made a deal with the god that cost me my soul. I killed many who were deserving, and many who were not. I killed my father.
That was your father in hell. Is this what it is to be a god? Is this how it always ends? Sons killing their mothers? Their fathers?
No. We will be the gods we choose to be. Not those who have been. Who I was is not who you be. We must be better.
This is an extraordinary moment for his character. This is the moment when he defeats the final boss of the game. Except this time, the final boss isn't some big scary evil god like Ares or Zeus. This time, the final boss is his own flaws, his own inability to confront his past, to be honest about his past mistakes. In this moment, he overcomes that. He grows as a character. He becomes a truly better man. It's inspiring stuff. It's so fascinating that at this moment of change, the greatest change he has ever undergone as a character, he is accused by the mourning Freya of being incapable of change. It's another one of these inversions of expectations. You would expect when Kratos finally succeeds and changes that he would be celebrated for it, that other characters would recognize and understand that change, but that's not what happens. Instead, because that character growth involved the death of her son, Freya views him as a monster. It complicates the moment in such a compelling way. As the audience, you get to feel excited for Kratos that he is growing, but that excitement is marred by the tragedy that has just taken place. A mother watching her son die right before her eyes. The writing in this game is so good. This isn't just good writing for a video game, even most books I read aren't this well written. Kratos' line here, "I killed many who were not deserving," is a little bit of an understatement. The game kind of presents it as if killing his father was his worst sin, and maybe in the context of a story about fatherhood and raising a son, especially a son he has been in conflict with at certain points during the story, that is the most important reveal. But to be frank, Zeus was an asshole. Zeus was one of those who deserved killing. It's the killing of people like Perithous or that man on the burning ledge or Poseidon's princess that I would like to see Kratos reckon with. If I have any criticism of this game's story, that would be it. I would much rather see Kratos emotionally grapple with the killing of so many innocent lives, rather than spend so much time grappling with the killing of his father, which doesn't feel like as big of a deal to me. Moving on, the key here is choice. They can choose to be better. At the start of the story, I don't think Kratos believed that he or his son really did have a choice. He thought that they were cursed by godhood, that it was inevitable that his son would live the same life of tragedy and violence as every other god in the series. But here at the end, he's realized that there is a choice, that they can be better. They can choose to be merciful and unselfish, but they have to be aware of that choice first. They have to fight against their worst selves. They have to fight against that pull towards selfishness and abuse of power. It's not something they can solve in a single day, a single journey, a single choice. They have to keep making the right choice every day for the rest of their lives. This is a conflict that will never be over. They will always be at risk of making the wrong choice again. But at least now, Kratos knows that there is a choice, and so does his son. Moving forward, the boys finally reach Jotunheim. Kratos gives Atreus his mother's ashes to carry on this final leg of their journey, which is a really touching moment, demonstrating how much more he trusts his son now than he did back at the start. Inside the mountain, they discover that the giants prophesied their entire journey. And not just the giants, but Atreus' mother too, because she was a giant. She set up this entire journey for them both to be able to grow, to both become the better gods they needed to be. Kratos realizes that Baldur was looking for her, not for him. And more importantly than that, he realizes that in some small way, Lefay was with them all along throughout the entire journey, because this was a journey she foresaw, that she prepared. Kratos also sees the prophecy of his death, which he doesn't react to much here, but does play a major role in guiding his decisions in the next game. But we'll talk about that more when we get there. In the final scene of the game, Kratos and Atreus spread Lefay's ashes together. The most important part of this scene is portrayed very subtly. Not much attention is drawn to this small detail. Notice how casually, how easily Kratos rests his hand on Atreus' shoulder in this last scene. Remember at the start of the game, how much Kratos struggled to demonstrate that physical affection? And now it is so easy for him that the game doesn't even bother drawing any attention to it at all. That shows how far he has come since the start of the game. But Kratos' incredible transformation is not finished yet. This is only part one of his journey in the Norse world, where he learns to make a better choice not just once, but to keep making that better choice day after day. And it's a journey that will be shaped by the prophecy of his death that he saw inside the Mountain of the Giants. His need to prepare his son to survive without him. This analysis will continue with his story into God of War Ragnarok, but not today, because this video is already really long. So I will see you again in part 2.
So, why'd you want to name me Atreus? I know it can't be for a god.
No. He was a soldier. A Spartan.
A great warrior?
All Spartans are great warriors. We trained from birth. Our lives were discipline, duty, battle, and death. Life was grim, and we greeted it grimly. But Atreus of Sparta was unlike the rest of us. He wore a smile even in the worst of times. He was happy. He inspired us to hope that though we were machines of war, yet there was humanity in us. Goodness. When the day came for him to lay down his life in battle, his sacrifice saved countless others and turned the tide in our favor. I carried him home on his shield and buried him with all the honors of Spartan custom. His memory was a comfort in dark times.
Wow, you actually told a good story. And we missed it.